blame him. So General Arnold called us in and he said, what can we do? And nobody let go of their film. And there were different branches, you know. And I said, why don't we pool it? That'll cut it down and release 2/3 or 75% for Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. It worked fine. Then we all drew what we needed out of the pool. And we were assured of enough film, you see, and solved the problem. There was that little power struggle. Isn't that typical?
Yes, well, it still goes on today, and just about it's. I'm William D. Welge for the Oklahoma Historical Society, and I'm interviewing Mr. Arthur B. Ramsey at his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico on May 18th, 1989. Mr. Ramsey, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your life and career, especially when you were still living in Oklahoma. Please give your full given name and date of birth.
Arthur B. Ramsey, November 27, 1914.
1914. And where were you born?
In, let's see, on the dining room table on East 9th Street, Oklahoma City. That's the way they did it.
And what were the names of your parents?
Walter R., known as W.R. Ramsey, and Anna Virginia Ramsey Calvert, before she was married.
I see. And when was your father born?
That I don't recall. I really don't remember the date.
Okay. Do you know your mother's birth date at all?
No, I don't know when she was born, but she was in her late 20s when she died. I was 6 years old then.
I see.
And that's the date, only date I remember.
Well, she was born sometime then after 1900.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
One brother, Charles Ramsey, who was 3 years older than I. He died in '72, and a sister, Marie Merrill. She's Dr. Merrill's wife in Oklahoma City. Still living in Oklahoma City at this time.
Is she younger or older?
She's 3 years younger. There were 3 years between each of us.
Nice pacing then.
Yeah, nice pacing. Nice planning, yeah.
Okay, in your early years of growing up, what schools did you attend in Oklahoma City?
Let's see, Wilson School, McKinley, Central High School, and then on to a school in Maryland, Fort Deposit, Maryland, known as Tome, T-O-M-E, and not far from, well, it was on the Chesapeake Bay. Beautiful place, beautiful place.
What years did you attend Central High School, do you recall?
Central was 30, 31 in there.
And did you graduate from Central, or did you move to go to another school at that time?
I went to another school.
I see.
Yeah, and then I didn't feel as though I was getting enough, so I went to Hills Business College. I wanted the business out of it, how to use a typewriter, how to add, how to subtract, and the basic things of bookkeeping and all that. And I took there a 6 months course.
I see.
And that's a cram course. And it was always crowded with people who were going to go to work. And that I learned.
Now, did you have any particular career in mind when you were attending this particular business school?
Yes, I wanted to be in the picture business.
I see.
Because I started in that part-time, of course, in 1927. Then 28, we bought our sound camera films, or cameras and sound equipment. And my first picture with sound was of W.R. Ramsey chipping a brick out of the old Guarantee Bank there on Broadway and Robinson and the Rock Island Railroad track. They were tearing down the Guarantee Bank then to build the Ramsey Tower. And then soon after that, we did a sound movie of Governor Murray, and for Paramount News, who I was shooting pictures for, covering Oklahoma, part of Kansas, part of Texas.
Now, how did you get interested in the motion picture industry?
Sort of as a hobby, and W.E., my uncle, W.E. Ramsey, bought me my first movie camera, a little DeVry camera, and we went down to Galveston, and I photographed some scenes of a beauty parade. You look at it now, it's anything but beauties. And so I guess that started me. And then Pathé asked me to go up to Yellowstone Park and photograph a scene of Calvin Coolidge in front of the geyser. That was my first newsreel assignment. So I asked President Coolidge, I said, stand here because this thing will go off in a minute and I want to get the scene and get you out of the water. He said, fine. He was a funny little fellow, you know. And so I got the scene. Geyser went way up. It went quite a ways then. And I got the scene, and he stood there. And I said, Mr. President, you're getting awful wet. I've finished shooting the scene. Thank you. And he still stood there, and soon he walked away. That's the first time I understood the saying, having sense enough to come in out of the rain. I was just amazed that this man, the President of the United States, continued to stand there in this geyser.
Was this about 1928 or?
That was either 27 or 28. Yeah. And then from there, why, they had me go back down to Galveston and shoot a later beauty parade.
I see.
So those were my first two films.
Well, how did you acquire the knowledge to handle the camera and
just
shooting, and then you
it was cheap then.
I see. And so you learned from the mistakes and just continued to improve from there, because there was no books published or anything like that.
And fortunately, WR, I call him, my father, was very generous, and he bought the equipment for me, the cameras and all those things that were very expensive in those days, and I couldn't afford that. So he bought it to keep me busy and out of mischief.
I see, I see. Since you brought him up, now what was his vocation? He was a businessman.
WR?
Yes.
He went to, he didn't go to school, he went to business college in Gainesville, Texas.
I see.
And I guess that's why he encouraged me to go to business college. And then his mother pushed he and his brother across the Red River in a tub, and they migrated to Oklahoma. And then they went back to Gainesville and back and forth. But he was born in a little log cabin in Overbrook, Oklahoma, down not far from the Red River.
I see.
And later went to Ardmore, and W worked in a shoe store with Tom Bledsoe, later the president of Santa Fe Railroad. And WR went to Oklahoma City and got a job in the Guaranty Bank as a cashier. And he made little investments, not much, because his salary was only $50 a month. So he later on bought a lease in Louisiana near Shreveport, 80-acre lease, oil and gas lease. He liked that. He developed a desire to like that. I don't know whether it was a gambling instinct or whatever, but it was his first start in the oil business. And a major oil field was discovered, and he sold it for $1 million.
Do you know what year that was?
That had to be, well, it was when I was 6 years old that my mother died. It was because she got ptomaine poison on the return trip from Louisiana on that trip, and then developed into yes, and then she developed pneumonia and died.
From that experience, then you mentioned that your father then bought the bank that he worked for.
Yes, he bought the Guaranty Bank, and then they tore it down and built the Ramsey Tower building, and that, as I recall, was 1930.
I see.
And they sort of set a record on building that. They built it in 9 months, which was quite a...
And that's 35 stories.
And that was 35 stories, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they did it, and brick and steel. It was just quite a sight.
Oh, my. Yes. And they were in competition with
the First National Bank, who were building a building across the street.
I see.
So it was a race, and people would place bets on who was going to win, and it was a lot of fun and laughs.
I'm sure. Once the tower was completed, then your father had offices located in that building.
Yes, he had the 30th floor for Ramsey Petroleum Company, and I had half of the 29th floor for my movie operations.
Now, how did you get linked up with Pathé News and Paramount?
Pathé wrote me a letter in, I believe that was 27 or 28, and wanted me to do that Calvin Coolidge thing. Now, how they got my name, I don't know, but there were no cameramen in the area at that time because they couldn't afford to keep them out there. There wasn't enough items of interest. But soon with Bill Murray and Will Rogers and the Herschel kidnapping and the 101 Ranch and the Pawnee Bill, you know, Gordon Lilly. And one thing went to another with the rodeos and things like that. In fact, I did a rodeo scene at McAllister with the prisoners with their striped uniform on. And then I was with Paramount News at that time. I switched from Pathé to Paramount. They offered me a better deal. They were going to pay for cost of flying my plane around and expenses for travel, where Pathé wouldn't pay travel. So I had my own plane, a Stearman, and I didn't have to have a license in those days, and I had better coverage for Paramount. But anyway, back to the prison film, Montague, who was the editor of Paramount at that time, he replaced my scenes of the prison rodeo instead of the rodeo at Madison Square Garden. He wrote me a letter, I still have it framed in there, and he said it's just something new I couldn't resist. He was later the editor of March of Time. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the, when you were with Pathé, how long were you with them? Do you recall?
I would say about 3 years, because about 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4
then
years.
Paramount for a long time.
Okay.
In fact, Paramount until I went to Hollywood and produced some films, and then of course I wasn't available, and that was it.
I see.
Bill, let me ask one question right here. Mr. Ramsey, you said your offices were in the Ramsey Tower. Was your studio there, or was it somewhere else at that time?
We had a studio on West Main Street with a sound stage and processing films. My office was on the 29th floor, and we stored some of the camera equipment, things like that up there.
You mentioned you had a Stearman aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you get interested in aviation? Was that just something that...
My brother and I, Charles, both of us, wanted a plane. And W.R. being very generous as he was, he bought me a Stearman and Charles a Swallow plane.
Mm.
And they both were made in Wichita, Kansas at that time.
Well, now, how did you learn to fly? Who taught you?
We had an instructor, and we were at the old airport in Oklahoma City. It was, well, what was that on? It was the street that followed the interurban lines there, and it wasn't much of an airport. Braniff was just starting then, and young Paul, not Tom Braniff, who later took it over, Paul was the real founder of Braniff Airways. And W.R. built a hangar over on the west side, and with a gasoline pump and a tank for us. And Paul was over where the passengers bought their tickets and kept his plane over there in a little thing. And he used to come over and borrow gasoline. He said, Arthur, I've got a load today. I've got 6 passengers to go to Tulsa. And that was Braniff Airways. On Tuesday they flew to Tulsa, and then Thursday they came back. And he said, I've got a full load and I don't have any gasoline. So I'd loan him gasoline now and then. He'd always pay it back.
Really?
But that was the start of Braniff Airways. And then later, Tom Braniff, many years later, took it in and made a public issue of it and sold stock and built the Braniff Airways.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find that fascinating. That's a bit of early Oklahoma aviation history we didn't have before.
That's right.
Did he, I guess the business continued to build up from there.
Yes, it sure did.
When you were photographing some of your aerial scenes from your plane, did you have someone at the controls with your brother, or were you doing both at the same time?
Sometimes I was doing both, and sometimes I had another fellow with me named Bus Boggs. He joined me in the 30s. We were both in Central High School together, and Bus was a real camera buff, and he was good at it. And he joined me as a hobby at first, and then later we had a sharing deal, and he wanted to go to Hollywood and be a Hollywood cameraman. And in '34 we went out to Paramount, and he got his job, and he's been a good cameraman ever since, and made some of the best pictures. Carol Lombard, Bing Crosby, and made some of their best films. And he's now over at Warner Brothers part-time, and then he went recently with Michael Landon to do his shows, which was one day a week at MGM and then out on location the rest of the week. He wants to retire because he said it's not much fun anymore. You go on a set and you see these bearded people, and he says there's no glamour. Glamour's all gone.
I'm sure.
He said the stars like Joan Crawford and all the big ones they're gone.
It's just not like what it used to be.
No glamour. No.
Well, now, when you were with Paramount, what were some of the news stories that you covered that originated in Oklahoma that you shipped back to them to New York?
Okay, 101 Ranch. Will Rogers, when they would visit Claremore or Chickasha or wherever with Wiley Post, they were pretty much together. Wiley Post would fly him back.
Did you get to know them very well when you were filming?
Yes.
Did Did they know you by sight?
Right. And then when I'd visit my uncle out there in Corsica Drive, he lived right across the canyon from Will Rogers, and we'd go down Sunday when they would play polo at his polo field. And there would always be Franchot Tone and Spencer Tracy and Daryl Zanuck and that crowd who were on the team. And then we'd go to Will Rogers' place right up at the canyon and have dinner.
I see.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it.
Well, what were some of the more exciting news stories that you covered?
We had the Urshel kidnapping, which was Machine Gun Kelly, Ruby, and the Shannons. We had the many bridges that Bill Murray would close, you know, the toll bridges, and for some reason or other he would close them, and that made a news story. It doesn't sound like much now, but it was. Lots of tornadoes, lots of rodeos. The rodeos I didn't like because you'd spend another day cleaning your camera up and getting the dust out and all that. But I could go on and on. Wild wells, we had a lot of wild wells in the Oklahoma City field. We had some wild gas wells in the cement field that my father discovered, the cement field over in Caddo and Grady County. And
well, let me ask you to give you some detailed information, especially like on the Urshel case when you were filming that. You were given special permission to film that. Give some background information on it, if you would.
All right, we were shooting that for Paramount, and Judge Vaught, who was the presiding judge, and he allowed us to photograph the case in court. The attorneys objected to the sentencing, so he did the sentencing as usual. We weren't allowed to photograph it. But after he then emptied the court with everyone except Kelly and all the ones being sentenced, and he did it all over again for the camera. So we had good scenes of that.
What was your impressions of Machine Gun Kelly?
Pretty tough boy. Yeah, he was pretty mean. Yeah. He even started a fight on the steps one day when the police were taking him up the steps for one of the days of trial, and somebody said something in the audience. A lot of people on the steps, you know. He grabbed one of them and started a fight. Of course, they quelled that in a hurry, but he was a pretty mean fellow.
And this was in Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City at the federal courthouse.
You say you shot films for the 101 Ranch and Pawnee Bill. Give some impressions about Gordon Lilly.
Well, Gordon Lilly and his wife were real circus people. They traveled around in that big convertible Cadillac of theirs and always wore white clothes and flamboyant costumes. But Gordon would call us whenever he had a barbecue or something up at Pawnee, which he had many of them with the Indians and buffalo. Have you ever tasted buffalo, Bobby? It's pretty hard to eat.
Yes.
We'd brown bag it. But he put on a real show for it. Gordon and his wife were real show people, and it was fun to be around them.
And this would be in the 30s, early 30s. When did he more or less quit doing his show, or did he die? And that's when it came to an end.
I was trying to think of the last year he tried to get me to go up to Colorado and do a scene, and that was his last. I can't remember the year.
I see.
The newsreel company said no.
You have filmed many politicians, and
Lots.
President Calvin Coolidge was the first.
Even Roosevelt.
Theodore
Franklin? Yeah.
Franklin?
They would never let us set our camera up until he got set and in his wheelchair and covered with a blanket that people didn't know he was in it. But that was a no-no. You could not photograph him trying to be pushed around or anything until he was settled.
He probably would have never been re-elected president had they been given that impression.
I don't think so. I don't think so. That was the opinion of quite a few people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, now give us some of your impressions of the Oklahoma politicians. You've talked about Bill Murray. Give some of when you.
That wonderful story about going to the mansion.
Yes,
well, he invited us. We told him we wanted an interview of him, requested by, I was Pathé, I was still Pathé then, and he said, sure, come on out and have dinner. So he told us to be there at 6, and then we would go in and photograph him and have this sound interview. And of course we had lots of questions to ask him. So when we arrived, he was sitting at the table in his boots and his big cowboy hat, smoking a cigar or something, and had his feet up on the plate at the head of the table. And he said, come on in, they'll give you something. I eat early, I don't wait. You come on in and they'll find something for you to eat, whatever you want. So he was that kind of a guy, you know, very crude. We tried to photograph once the oil that was being run at the field at night, Oklahoma City field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see, Cicero Murray was in charge, Governor Murray's brother was in charge of the National Guard, and he'd run us off every time. Those lines were just frosted up at night, you know, and he didn't want us in there. They kept people out. Because that was the start of hot oil. Those wells made 12, 15,000 barrels each a day.
Oh my word.
All right, those big lines and big tanks were just frosted up, mainly the lines, because the pressure was so great.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just covered with this snow, and he didn't want us to photograph that. Because you see, they ran that oil, and they didn't pay the royalty on it. And I'm not sure they paid the gross production tax, if any, then in those days. It was the early 30s, and oil was $1 then. And at the height of the field, when it first came in, oil was 15 cents a barrel for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And because East Texas came in at the same time, and it was a glut of oil, really a glut. In East Texas, they were letting it run down ditches instead of building pipelines. It was unbelievable.
And that's about the time when the Interstate
Interstate Combat Commission and proration and all those things, that was the beginning of it, because it was a terrible waste.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you probably cut your teeth in filming several of Murray's, I don't want to say stunts, but he seemed to utilize the media quite a bit during his governorship. You talk about the bridge crossings.
Yes.
Do you have any detailed information about that?
I don't remember the details on that, but as I remember, it was a toll bridge, and he was going to make it not a toll bridge, and there was a big fight over that, and it hit the front page, and his office would call us. We didn't have to call him. He wanted to be photographed. He loved it.
So he knew what the power of the media
Sure
was.
he did, yes.
I thought,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just, one little tiny question about Governor Murray. Did you ever see the governor's mansion lawn when it was plowed up, when he planted those potatoes and things in there?
No,
Did you ever
I didn't
see that?
No.
I just wondered, well, he did. He plowed it up,
did.
planted potatoes. Yeah, and they harvested them and put them in the mansion and doled them out.
I'm surprised he didn't call us to photograph it.
Well, do you think he had aspirations of running for the office of president then? He ran during the early 30s, or at least was going to be nominated as an Oklahoma favorite son. And do you think his utilization of getting his name before the public with these films might have something to do with that?
I don't know what his political strategy was. He flip-flopped around so much that it was pretty hard to guess what he was going to do next.
I see.
It really was.
Now, after he left office, it was Ernest W. Marlin.
Yes, C.W. Marlin. Yes,
And,
wonderful fellow. We knew him quite well, and we did a movie on the oil fields in Oklahoma City. And he had me a friend joined me of his, Joe Davidson, who did the sculpturing of the Will Rogers sculpture, and I think he did the Pioneer Woman. But Joe was a wonderful fellow, and we went around the trip around the field and spent 2 or 3 days making this movie. It turned out very well. So.
Do you have any memories of filming certain incidences connected with the Marlin administration that he would have taken advantage of?
Of that film, that was the only experience I had.
see.
He didn't call us for anything. He wasn't a flamboyant person.
How about...
He was a businessman, you know.
Businessman?
Yes, he was. A good one, too.
Did you get to know him very well personally?
Very well. The old Marlin Oil Company in Ponca City discovered lots of oil in lots of places. Even up in Wyoming, and you'll find the Marlin discoveries all over the country. He had a wonderful company, and he made the mistake of letting J.P. Morgan talk him into going to marketing filling stations, which he didn't want to do. But they made the money available so easy that he went ahead and put in filling stations and Marlin Oil and marketed their product. Well, that's a very competitive market, the selling of gasoline and oil. And a few pennies can make a lot of difference. So they overextended, and J.P. Morgan took them over. I remember the day they walked in Ponca City and said, "Give us your keys." And a little fella named Morgan, he was tough, and he sent them all out the front door, and it was then Conoco, Continental Oil Company. So it was kind of sad, but transition.
What happened to Marlin after that?
He retired. And his land lived in his mansion in Ponca City.
I see.
Yes. We used to enjoy some wonderful parties up there.
Did you get to know any of his family members very well?
No,
or
you know, there
he
was
a private man?
that was, yes, he was very private. He was searching for his wife. I remember that story. And he didn't talk about it a great deal, but he was trying to find her. I don't know if he ever did or not. You know, that was a long story.
Now, what is that?
She disappeared, and they hunted for her all over the world. Why she left, and if she returned, I never did know. But that was a sad event for her.
When was that?
That was during this period.
That's interesting.
Now,
Now, Frank Phillips, he never would let us photograph him.
he wouldn't.
Nope, old skinny Frank. He looked like a New England school teacher, you know. And he was always suspicious. And I don't know if he did not want the publicity or what. But we'd go up to Bartlesville, and he wouldn't let us in the door. No. He was a good friend of my father's. My father even called him once. Well, I went up to the office, visited with him, but he wouldn't let us pull out the cameras and shoot any pictures.
That's odd because his collection contains photograph album after photograph album after photograph album in the museum up there. That's strange.
It's amazing. Maybe he didn't want it. Maybe for some reason, I don't know. But do it.
There are 12 large albums of 8x10 photographs on every page.
Isn't it something? We wanted a sound interview of him because the newsreel companies wanted it, you know, to destroy him. But he said no.
What were some of the other prominent individuals that you might have
let's see.
filmed during your early days?
Trying to think. Cornelius Vanderbilt from New York. We did an interview on him. I don't remember why, but he was a delightful fellow. And I think he was there visiting our governor or something at that time. And because the newsreel called me and said he's down there, got an interview on him. And we did. Who else? Well, between rodeos and tornadoes and Will Rogers and Murray and all, I can't recall all of them. There's a long list. I know we photographed over 160 to 70, 160,000 feet of film, 35 millimeter.
What about the Miller brothers? Did you know any of them personally?
Yes,
Or you
the few
have
that were
impressions
left.
of them?
Yes, we went up there and photographed a rodeo or two. And Tom Mix was there in the early days.
What was your
That's the
impression
other
of
one.
old Tom?
I don't remember him. That was at the start of my newsreel career, and I really don't remember much about him. He was there, and I don't know. He gave me a photograph, autograph, but I don't remember doing a film on him. I can't put it together.
What about the Miller brothers? Do you have any impressions of any one of those gentlemen?
No, it was just a big ranch. No. I did a picture for the American Hereford Association. Now that I was quite impressed. It took us a year to make it in color. And we visited many ranches, the DuPont Ranch. Let me see. I think the one that was most impressive was the Mars Ranch in Pulaski, Tennessee. It was just gorgeous. They built a barn and it would run clear over a hill. And each of the Herefords had their own stall with electric fan on them. And the house was quite a mansion. And they kept their racehorses there, retired in there. And it was just beautiful country to photograph. And we had some delightful steak dinners there.
I bet.
We went to San Simeon and shot some scenes there. We were to go to Hawaii and shoot some loading of cattle over there and unloading, but the war started and they called it off. And just one ranch after another. Wyoming Hereford Ranch was another one. The biggest was the Hereford Ranch out around Hereford, Texas. 1 million acres owned by the British. And we did all the branding scenes out there, and very picturesque.
Did you ever shoot?
Flat country.
Excuse me. Did you ever shoot any footage down around the King Ranch?
Where?
The big King Ranch down.
Oh,
in
the King
Texas.
Ranch. No, didn't have any occasion to go down there.
What about is it Rockefeller who had the setup in Arkansas? Big fancy cattle setup in Arkansas.
We photographed pictures for Roy Turner at his ranch out of Sulphur. Now, Rockefeller bought that ranch later on during the war. And that's the only one I knew of. And we used to make a scene. Roy had us made a movie of his sales and things of the ranch about every other year. And it was most enjoyable. It was interesting.
Did you... of course, he was governor in the late 40s, or middle 40s, I guess. Did you do any filming of him, or were you involved in the war effort at that time?
No, that was during the war. I visited Roy after I returned from New York, or after the war, and after I finished at the Empire State Building, and he was still governor then. And we were such good friends. I told him I wanted to go in the oil business. He said, well, it's unfortunate you were not in the oil business with your father, W.R. I said, yes, I know that now. And I wish I had. I would have learned a lot and enjoyed it too. And he said, well, let me give you a little advice. Own a lease. Own it yourself. You can be a lease broker, you can be a service, 100 service companies of all kinds. You can deal in pipe, you can do all kinds of things, drilling rigs. But he said, to get somewhere and have some reserves and something down the road, own that lease, that working interest, and own an interest in the wells, own it. That's the way to go. So that's what I did. And I drilled, while I was president of the Empire State Building in New York. I never thought of it at that time, but I met some very interesting people, the Rockefeller brothers and Henry Colgate, Tom Watson, Hunt Hartford, etc. And also Bill Paley. And so when I left the Empire State Building and resigned to go in the oil business, returning to Oklahoma, I called on them for some monies to help me drill it. So we drilled 12 drive holes. I learned a lot, worked on the rigs, bought the leases and everything, but I didn't have sufficient geology or good luck with me. So we had a meeting in New York and the group said, let's give this up, we're not doing any good. And I said, let's do one more. Give me one more shot and then I won't bother you anymore. So I returned to Oklahoma City and I talked to Lloyd Noble in Ardmore, and I said, Lloyd, I've got to have an oil patch. Where do you know in all these leases that you have that you farm one out that I got a well or two or three? He says, I have one up by the Conoco's Camp Field up in Stevens County. Now it comes, the geology, it comes down dip to the west, but you will get 1 or 2 wells. I don't think it'll be anything big, but you'll get a commercial well or 2 on that 160, which we own the royalty on. And I'll lease it to you for 30 days and take a little over on it, no cash. So I took it, and we drilled it. It came in flowing 999 barrels a day natural, and we got 11 of them on that track. They were 10-acre spacings, and they were all that kind. So I was back in business. So then we drilled 142 wells with this same crowd, and we hit on 97.
Oh.
So we were in oil business. But that was the opening of part of the East Velma pool. It came down and it went up. So before I released the information, for 2 or 3 days I was busy buying leases on the upside, needless to say. And we drilled a lot of those wells down there. So that was kind of my patch and my start. And of course, a few days later, the major companies were in there in swarms and with nothing left. But that was the start.
Well, now you talked about your father being in the oil business, and you wish you had talked to him at the time. When did he die?
He died in 47.
47, I see.
And I went in the oil business, returned to Oklahoma in 48.
48. Now you
I've been
talked...
at 41 years.
41 years. Now, when you were involved with the Empire State Building, now was that before or after your career in the military?
After.
Okay, now I want to pick up on your military career because you were in filmmaking at that time too.
Yes.
Did you join the Army or whatever branch of the service at the outbreak of the war?
Yes, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, which I was a member of, decided they would have a motion picture group and out of Hollywood, and I was included in it. And let's see, Warner was in it, Warner Brothers, and a lot of the talent, good cameramen, story writers, directors, producers, everything were in it. So the Army gave us commissions as second lieutenants, started us in. They did give Warner a colonel's commission. So anyway, and he was very upset, by the way, when they tapped him on the shoulder one day at the studio and said, "You received orders to go to England." He thought he could stay right there in Warner Brothers, so it caused a little uproar. The Army is the Army, you know. And so anyway, we went to Camp Livingston for basic training and maneuvers. And then we were assigned out to the different camera units in each 9 theaters of operation. And I was transferred to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, which was the Air Force procurement center. And we had a training film producing up there, sound stages, processing, laboratories, everything. And I produced, I think, 47 films on the bombers and fighters. And I had the B-17s, 24s, and all those. And they were very boring things. There would be one on the electrical and one on the motors and the engines and everything. And those were the training films that they were making in a hurry so they could train these pilots, mechanics, and crews. And they were very dull, but they did train them. And then I was transferred to New York to be in charge of the Air Force combat camera units, where we had a unit in each theater of operation. The films were sent to us every day. We were in New York because your processing film laboratories were there, Consolidated, Pathé, Deluxe, etc. And so we'd have them processed. First, G2 had their choice of the film that they wanted and restricted. Other was for training, other for newsreel, and so forth and so on. So I stayed there until the end of the war. And General Arnold put me there, and he said, "I want you there because he's had the overall picture," and that's where I was.
So you didn't go overseas at all?
No.
Who were some of the people in your company that you worked with that were from the Hollywood group that...
Oh, there were writers and directors, and let me see, I can almost remember some of the names. There was Yates, Douglas Yates. They had Republic Pictures, his father, and he was with them. Many of the boys from MGM and from Paramount. Let me see.
Did you work?
Harold Knox, who was Granny's, Irene Ryan's husband.
I see.
Yeah, and he's retired now. He's living in Phoenix. We correspond and get together once in a while. And there was some over 20th century, and I can't remember their names. I don't think they'd mean much too. There was Ludwig and, oh yes, Eddie Granger. He produced the Flying Tigers film at Republic Pictures. He was there.
Did you ever work with Frank Capra?
We did on the Why We Fight series. Yes, a lot of us worked on that.
And when did you work on that?
That was during this right field time.
I see.
Yes.
How long of a process was that?
Oh, that went on and off for a long time, because you started with the Prelude to War, and you had Nazi strike, and Battle of Britain, Battle of Russia. So you see it took place over a long period of time, not constantly. And Ronald Reagan did the narration on most of it, along with Walter Houston. Did a good job, yes.
And so when the war concluded, what line? You went into the petroleum business at that point?
No, when the war concluded, John Raskob, who owned the Empire State Building and built it, asked me to come up there and join him at the building.
I see.
I had no plans. I didn't want to go back to the movie business. And so I joined him, and I was there for a couple of years. And enjoyed it very much.
And you were president of the Empire State? What kind of duties did you have as president?
Well, it's like running a little city. I first went up there executive VP, and then later Hugh Drum had a heart attack, who was the president then, so I took his place for a while. But it's like running a city. It really is, with the restaurants and all of the different people and different things they want, and particularly the observation tower. It was an amusement park practically up there, you see, and then the little elevator that went up to 102. And we had beautiful offices on the 80th floor, on private dining room. And Pierre DuPont, who was Raskop's silent partner, he would always join us. And Fred Ecker, chairman of the board of Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, he held the first mortgage. And he would come up and join us, quite a guy. Mm-hmm. And he drilled some wells with me later.
Really?
Yes, he was a friend of my father's from way back.
And so you did this for a couple of years. Did you have any major incidences that occurred while you were overseeing the operations of the building?
Not really, no. Just political things with New York City. That's enough to keep you busy, because something would come up and we'd have to get together and make a decision and play a little politics.
Who was the mayor at the time?
LaGuardia.
LaGuardia. I was going to ask if it was LaGuardia.
Yeah, well, LaGuardia.
You didn't have any opportunities to film him, or you just got completely out of the film?
I was out of the picture business. I bought a home up in Bronxville, up in Westchester County, and I bought that from Joe Kennedy. He was moving his family up to Hyannisport. It's a beautiful colonial red brick house, covered about half a block, and we enjoyed it. It was just wonderful. The commute on New York Central was 25 minutes express to Grand Central Station, and then I'd walk to the building if the weather was good. So we enjoyed it. Those were good days in New York.
Did you know?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Did you know Joe Kennedy well?
I knew the old man, and he drilled a couple of wells on me, but he was very harsh, and it was no fun. I told his man in Tulsa, Ray Kravitz, who handled his investment, Ray, I don't need this. I said, the other people with me in New York are kind, considerate gentlemen, and they don't take their cane and whack at you, and old Joe's too wild for me. And I said no more.
What about the boys?
I didn't know any of the boys. No.
When you, after about a 2-year period, you left the Empire State Building and you came back to Oklahoma. What prompted you to come back to Oklahoma?
In the oil business.
Yeah, it wasn't that you were tired of New York City.
Well, John was in his 70s then, and I knew he would sell that building eventually. He'd even talked about it. He had 13 children, and he said, I'm going to sell the building one of these days. And I said, John, I don't think I'm going to be here in New York in the rat race you've been very kind, very generous, and we used to have some wonderful times. He had what he called his country home down in Chesapeake Bay out of Wilmington. We'd take his private railroad car on Friday noon, always 20 people, governors and presidents of railroads and things, and go down to his farm, as he called it, 10,000 acres. And there he had an English house that had 40 guest bedrooms. The guest house had 50. And we had golf course, skeet shooting, the yacht, the swimming pool, everything you would want to have fun. And he would never let you have more than 2 cocktails, whatever you want, but only 2. He says, I want intelligent conversation at dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always very palatial. Butlers and things serving, and conversation was good. But he would have wine and then 100-year-old brandy afterward.
Gracious.
And he wanted what he wanted, and he got his way. But those were great days, a lot of fun. Those are all gone now.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you came back to Oklahoma in '48, and you got your start. And I'm curious, how did you get to know Bill Paley?
When I was at the Empire State Building.
Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
Of course, he was launching the network. He'd already been in the radio network, but he was getting into the television
He
at
was
that
in
time.
it, yes, he sure was. He was a real pioneer. Bill was a very nice guy, and he would enjoy, after we were drilling wells together, why we had success, and we'd go back to New York and have conferences in October and do our Christmas shopping up there at the same time, and he would have us out to his Long Island home and have parties and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember some of the people that were out there. It was most enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Well, in all the course of up to this time, when did you marry, and who did you marry?
Let me see. I was first married in, 37, 38, somewhere in there, to S.L. Thurman, Judge Thurman's daughter in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
And her aunt was Bess Braniff Airways. So that's how we knew the Braniff family, other than Paul and in the other days. And they soon left Oklahoma and went to Dallas and made their headquarters there for Braniff Airways. And that was it. So we had 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, she died of cancer. Then I remarried, had one child by Lyle, husband.
And so, with the launching of your oil career, where did you set up your headquarters?
In the oil business?
Mm-hmm.
I had a little cubby hole there on the 32nd floor of the building.
Ramsey Tower?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't Ramsey Tower then. It was APCO, which was Anderson Pritchard Oil Company. And so my brother still had his office there. So he didn't want me to join him. And Charles was a loner. All his life he was a loner. He wanted everything his way for Charles and that. And so he sort of lived a lonely life. My sister and I got along great, Marie.
Now your brother...
And I had this little office on the 32nd floor. It was one of those apartments that they had up there. They had apartments. And Jack Anderson, who was Steve Anderson's son of Anderson Pritchard, he had another apartment on the other side, and we turned them into little offices. And then Judge Hefner had this space for a while, and he let me office with him to get started. And then he moved to a different space, and the situations changed for him. But I was able to get in there and sort of start out on a shoestring, and didn't have a secretary, and I had a typewriter. That was it.
But after your big discovery in Stevens County, things kind of mushroomed from there.
Much better. We acquired some additional space, and then I had a bookkeeper and a secretary, and then production men, of course, in the field and all that sort of thing.
Well, now, do you have any office still in Oklahoma City, or is it all out here now in Albuquerque?
We did during the boom. We had an apartment down in Norman, and we would fly back. We were participating in a lot of wells at the airport then, and we'd fly back, and it was very handy to go right to the apartment in Norman and then do our business for a couple of days and then run to the airport and come back here.
Now, when was this? Is this in the
That
70s?
was in 83.
83.
Yes, 82 and 83. We were doing a lot of things back then.
Now, when did you move to Albuquerque?
Moved to Albuquerque in 69. In 61, the oil business was so bad, if you had proration was so severe, and oil was $1, that we couldn't drill wells. The oil independents, there were 15,000, and then it reduced to about 6,000 that went out of the business. Because if you had a well that would make, say, 100 barrels a day, they would let you run 10 barrels for 10 days. And you couldn't get money from the banks to drill development wells because it took 7-year payout with that formula. And so you couldn't develop wells. If you found it, you couldn't develop it. And you could barely make a go of it. So I arranged for other people to operate my wells. And I moved to Pebble Beach, California, and did some work out there. Leasing and some drilling over in Signal Hill and Bakersfield. And enjoyed that until 67. And then came back to Santa Fe for a year. I thought I'd live there. And that wasn't, a little too rustic. Nice, enjoyable, but too, as my wife says, a lot of charm, and you sweep it out every morning. So we wanted a good school for Jeff, and the Albuquerque Academy was it, not a military school. It was well endowed, it's well equipped. You really should see it. It's on the north end of town. 10 boys to a class at that time, and they really got an education. So he went through the academy, and then went to Trinity University in San Antonio, graduated there. And then he took the landman courses in University of Oklahoma in Norman. And then he has taken all of the courses of Louis Mossberg, an attorney that gives these oil and gas land courses under the auspices of the Tulsa University. In fact, he's there today taking a refresher course. Louis gives them every so often, and you see the best in the business that are there.
Well, now, of all your sons, he's the only one in the oil business.
Only one in the oil business.
Now, what are your other children's involvement? What businesses
Well,
are
there's
they in?
Philip, the oldest. He did a lot of decorating and some building of hospitals. He's recently moved from Chicago. That was in Chicago when he left University of Oklahoma. They all graduated from OU, the other 4 boys. And he's moved to Palm Beach, Florida. So he's enjoying that and doing things for different people down there, the Donald Trump type. And talked to him last night. He says it's really great. He says your budget is unlimited. And so he's happy there. And 2 boys are in Dallas. One of them makes TV films, these little ads, you know, like the raisins. He didn't make that, but that sort of thing. And the other one manages about 9,000 apartment complexes in Dallas and Houston. Hal Ramsey. And David Ramsey, the other boy, graduated from University of Oklahoma as a engineer and went right to work for Dow Company in Freeport, Texas, and he's been there ever since. And he's one of their top engineers now, and research engineers, and they've just put him in charge of communications of all of their offices all over the world. So he's in Germany one day, Japan the next, and he's enjoying it.
Well, that's great.
So that's it. Now Jeff is here as my landman, and he, on his computer systems, keeps track of all the family's properties in oil and gas. So it works out very nice.
So you had all sons, no daughters?
5 boys and now 1 grandson and 2 granddaughters.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
In your 40-some-odd years in the petroleum business, how have you seen it change? What significant things have come about that have either improved it or caused it more problems?
Oh, they're riding so hard on us, it's hardly worth drilling a well. I'm sorry to tell you that. But back when I started in 48, you just file a paper with the Corporation Commission in Oklahoma and go out and stake your well and drill it. and nobody bothered you. Now you pay them $500 to file that intent to drill. And they charge you for this, they charge you for that. They tell you how to drill the well and what you can't do, and spacing and the corporation commission and all. It's out of this world.
How do you think?
It's no fun anymore.
How do you think?
In fact, we don't drill in Oklahoma anymore. I'm sorry to say. There's lots of oil to be found, lots of gas, and I know where some of it is. But under the present conditions, it's too restrictive, too expensive, and well, let's take this wildcat I'm drilling out here now on the Mexican border near the line of Arizona. It's a wildcat, 70,000 acres. I've worked on it for 11 years on and off to get it together. And but it's truly a wildcat. Your restrictions by your governmental bodies now are so tight and so expensive. For example, the water sand is at 180 feet, so they have you set 600 feet of surface casing, just in case there's another one. Just in case, you know. Well, that's thousands of dollars in pipe and cement, and that goes on. And they tell you the mud to use, and what you can do here, and what you can do there. And you can hardly breathe between state requirements and demands and federal. And of course, our CPAs are busy all the time. What are the new laws? Where are we going this year? Are we going to? Is it worth drilling? And so it's changed. It kills the pioneer to go out and drill. I called 41 drilling contractors in the state of New Mexico, and none of them wanted to go 400 miles to drill a well in New Mexico's far southwest corner. Too far from home. Wasn't money. It was just, I don't want to go that far. And out there in the boonies, you don't have any facilities out there. I have to drive 30 miles to get to a motel. And they didn't want it. So I finally got a rig from Phoenix. And I got a little cable tool first, and they saved the lease. I got in just 33 days before my unit expired. 33 hours, I mean. And so now we're switching to rotary because it's tough drilling and we're going on down. But I just point that out as some of the problems. That it's like the picture business has changed. I wouldn't want to be in Hollywood under the present conditions. And it's tough to get a well drilled. It's no fun anymore. The romance is gone too. No?
But
how
do you think this recent accident in Alaska is going to affect? Is there going to be even greater restrictions?
There are going to be greater restrictions now, state and federal. The things they're proposing are going to be astronomical. And of course, major companies can overcome it. Like Standard Oil raised the price of gasoline 20, 30 cents in California. People are going to pay for it. But with an independent, he can't raise anything because he's not in marketing. But it's going to be tougher, yes. And your prices, it's great, $15, $20, there's nothing wrong with that. Even with the cost of drilling, the high cost of drilling. But your restrictions are getting worse and worse. And the stripper boys who have stripper wells, they're walking all over them. They're going to tax them right out of, they're going to make them plug those wells. And we don't have that much oil to spare. Your next question is, why is the Alaska oil going to Japan? I learned that the other day.
Oh, it is?
Yes, I learned that from a major oil company. They don't broadcast it. But here we're importing 42% of our oil now. And why are we putting that over there? Maybe it's a trade, balance of trade or something. I don't know. That's politics, obviously.
Well, I was going to ask you about what the national policy, why we're always importing and there's putting so much restriction on the petroleum industry here that doesn't even foster a condition where they would...
It's, you're fighting a bureaucracy all the time. And you can't win. It's like fighting City Hall. You can't win. So I've had several independents tell me, I want to live longer. I'm retired. But I'm still, I guess it rubbed off from my father, I still love to drill wildcats.
I was going to ask you, how long are you going to continue in this, even though the restrictions that
I don't know. It just depends. If I hit on this one, I'll be busy. Very busy for a lot of years. I
Well,
think that would do it.
That's good.
It's a big structure. I enjoy it. It's hard work.
Mhm.
It's hard work and it's dirty and all that. But there's a romance to it, and excitement, and discovering a new oil field is just exactly what we need.
Mhm.
And I personally, in my own opinion, and it has been for several years, we must develop solar energy.
Mhm.
The government started off great with it. The boys now at the university in Utah have found a shortcut, and we must do it. We cannot keep using this valuable source of oil to burn up in cars and heat houses and factories. Solar is there, it's just ready for us, but you can see the opposition.
Mhm.
Who's going to fight it?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle, but it will come. And the change is here.
Mhm. It has to come.
It has to come. It has to come. We can't use this oil. We must save it for the 25,000 petrochemical products, plastic, greasing the wheels of your engine and making it run, and making tires and things like that, and medicines, medication. You've got to have oil for that.
One of the questions that's always puzzled me, and I know the main reason why is because they claim it's so expensive, but back during World War II, they recycled everything for the war effort.
Yeah.
Scrap metal,
Yes.
glass,
Yes.
tires, everything. And if it's becoming such a short supply today, why aren't there more
Recycling.
people involved in the recycling of this kind of material today?
I saw a television program a month ago, and there are certain parts in the people scattered over the U.S. that are doing just that, and it's very profitable.
Mhm.
Now here in this town, they start separating the garbage for recycling of tin cans and things. So we have, starting next week, have to put our bottles in one bag and cans in another and paper in another, and for recycling of the paper and the cans that I know of.
Mhm.
Bottles, I don't know what they're going to do.
Mhm. That's just getting to that
It's
point.
getting there. They passed the law, and it's supposed to go into effect next week.
Well, now, besides your involvement, especially with this new well, what do you do with your spare time? What hobbies do you enjoy, and cultural events?
They don't have any anymore. It used to be photography, but I gave that up. I just work all night.
I see.
Yeah, too much.
You don't travel or
Haven't had time,
I see.
other than business. Yes.
I see.
I'll get into Dallas, or I'll get into Denver, or in Phoenix, something like that. And I just work too much, I guess. But my work is my hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
And you seem
I
to enjoy it.
I do enjoy it. I sure do. Yeah. And my wife Lyle used to be with Shell Oil Company, and she likes it.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff, worked in the oil field one summer when he was still in Trinity, and I guess the bug bit him too, so
Mhm.
he's in it.
Well, you mentioned one of your sons was making ads,
TV ads.
TV ads. So
Yeah.
he seems to have that part of
Yeah,
your
that's a little bit of show
movie
business there.
rubbed off on
Yeah.
him.
And he's a movie type.
Is he? Well,
He is that.
I'm sure he's probably tapped you for the basic information because you're one of the pioneers in the industry.
Well, he has in the past, yes, but he's on his own now, and he's doing all right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
I always told the boys, do what they enjoy doing, and don't be clock watchers or you won't succeed. And they've done it, and they're doing all right.
I have a question. Actually, I have one or two, but I want to start with this one. You were showing us some lovely photographs of the beautiful home area that your father built in Oklahoma City, out around Lake Hefner. Did you say that's where that was?
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
I would like to know, how large an area did that encompass? How many acres was in that?
Let's see, he had 160 on the hill, and I think there was about, I'd say 320 acres, home, everything, and he had the hill adjoining, and about 320 acres would be my guess.
When did he build?
He started building that in 1926. And it went on for 2 or 3 years because they had to dredge it out, they had to make a lake out of it, build a home, build the houseboat, and that was his hobby. He'd leave the office at 5 and go to the country place. And he just loved to go out there and just walk around and make plans and plans. And he kept those people out there for 2 years building. I didn't think he'd ever quit.
Did he name that area? Did he have a name for his?
No, he didn't. He just called it the country place. I never did give it a Shangri-La or something, no. No.
The photographs are beautiful.
He certainly enjoyed it. No,
And who do you still own that now, or does someone else own
no
that property?
my sister, when she married Nelson Clayball, why they, my father had died, and we all sold our interest in it. WR left it to all of us, and we sold her our interest very cheap, so she'd have a home. She wanted to live out there, and she did for years. And then it was sold to a building contractor.
Now, I have a question just for me. I have to ask this. In your early days when you were working, doing film work and motion pictures and had a connection with Hollywood, did you ever meet John Wayne?
Yes, he was on the studio.
Oh, tell me about John.
Well, I tell you, when you're inside the studio, they're just another John Doe. And you may visit about something, you know, or what do you think of the new camera, or how do you like that new director? Does he know what he's doing? And it's just like you would in high school with another friend. You don't look at them as a movie star or director or anything because you're too busy talking trade, the business.
And he spent a lot of time doing that. He was just a consummate
yes.
professional from what I understand.
They all had their funny little ways, you know. And like Joan Crawford, she was a wild woman, but on the set, why, it was a different world.
Do you have any little interesting stories about John? I mean, anything you can remember that?
No, he was a rugged guy. He loved the cowboy side. He made a film out here, you know. I think it was called The Cowboy, up in the hills up here. And that's about all I know. I'd see him on the set, and your friends on the set at the studio. And it's just like Harry or Joe or anybody else, just like we're discussing things, no different. But you see, when they get out in the public, then it's a different world. And they're putting on a show.
And of course, that's the side we see.
That's the side of the public.
But he's my favorite, and he'll always be my favorite.
Really?
I just had to ask.
He was quite a guy.
Well, since she brought that up, Jimmy Stewart's my favorite. Did you have any encounters with him?
No, I know him over to MGM for a while when we were doing a picture over there. But he was a real down-to-earth fellow and friendly and would visit with you or whatever.
What picture were you working on with him?
Oh, let me see. I was not with him. No, I was working on
Oh.
a picture I was working on, and we made some scenes over there with Mae West Klondike in it.
Oh,
We went to Alaska with that, at Juneau, and
Now I wanted to ask, getting back, now you were 13 when you started your career in motion pictures, okay?
I had my airplane.
And had your airplane.
Right.
Were you one of the youngest pilots ever to fly at that time?
I think so. Yeah, you didn't have to have a license then, so nobody paid any attention to you.
You didn't have any accidents, did you?
No, I had a close one though. When the Army was flying the mail, you know, for a while, I was coming in to land, and I had just skimmed over the high lines that were on bordered the field on the north in Oklahoma City, and one of these airmail hotshot pilots came under the high line. So I looked down and I was making my approach, and here he was landing, and my instructor was over by the hangar, which they go over there and have a little coffee, and then they're on their way and they unload the mail. And I wiggled down the runway and got up to speed and came all around and made it. And my instructor picked a fight with him and flattened him. Don't ever do that to some young guy. Again, well, he's very cocky, you know, and taking chances, daredevil type, you know. And so that was the extent of that.
Do you still fly?
No. The instructor took the plane up, my steerman, one day on a Sunday, and took a girlfriend up and was showing off, and climbed too steep and came right around, crashed at the airport. Boom. That was the end of the airplanes. And so my father got rid of the other one, and that was the end of it.
Were both of them killed?
Yes. Yeah. And so he said that was enough. He was going to build a runway and everything out at the country home, but that stopped it.
And you never had another interest in flying since then?
No, I had all the planes I needed in Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, photographing and going to different airfields to make certain scenes, and I was exposed to a lot of it. That was enough.
When they were building the Ramsey building, what prompted your father to want to build it?
I never did know.
Okay, but you captured it from the very beginning.
Yes.
To the completion.
From the tearing down of the Guaranty Bank, I can't think of the. I can almost remember the contractor who did that. But they ran into problems. The old river used to be right through there, and they couldn't get a footing, and they have to go deeper and deeper, you know. They finally got a footing, but the old riverbed used to go right through that part of town. And so they had to get, what do they call them? Welder foundations. So they had to go until they had bedrock, and they
How
changed.
far was that? Do you know?
I don't remember, but it caused quite a furor. They were wondering how deep they were going to have to drill and dig, and but they finally made it, and then went ahead to go.
During the construction, did you have any platforms where it was just open space and girders, and you'd be up several flights?
I sure did. It was the night of the celebration. Well, they had finished the steel work. So on the 30th floor, the Starrett brothers laid planks up there, you know, planks that big, and they go over as far as the steel work. Well, I was up there and intent on photographing because they had the mayor and the different city officials there, and we had lights and everything else, you know, photographing it. And I kept backing up because I couldn't get them all in it. And Ennis Helm hollered at me. He said, "Don't take another step." I turned around, and the next step was straight down.
Oh, my word.
And so he saved my life on that one. I was just too engrossed in photographing, you see, and they should have had a rope around. They did not.
And you were at the 30th floor.
30th floor. They put a rope on right away. So that was the closest one, other than on the Santa Fe Railroad, went into the river up at in Guthrie. I was running down to get a long shot of the engine, half in the water and half out, and I started to jump and get a scene, what looked like a sand pile. And my assistant said, "Don't jump in that, that's a river." And it was just foam. So I had some ghosts like that, you know. Otherwise, okay.
Well, I find that extremely fascinating that, I was curious to know if, up on the 30th floor with just open girders like that, what was the wind like?
It was bad. It was bad. It was best not to go up there. I would go up and get pictures during the construction of brickwork and steel work, and you know they have these outside elevators for freight and material, and one of the boys, I had the camera all tied down, and I wanted pictures. I went down floor by floor, you know. So the operator down there, I guess, thought he'd have a little fun, and he said, "Now hang on to that second rope so you won't get out of focus," and he dropped me. They did that with the workers, see, it was old hat. But I wasn't used to it. That wasn't so good.
Yeah. You should have known better toying with
rugged boys like that. No, I did. I learned right then. No.
Well, did they have any accidents while in the construction of the building? Did you?
I don't remember any. I sure don't. No one was hurt. That I remember.
And that was pretty phenomenal time, though, to get something constructed of that size and,
That's right.
and quality in 9 months.
Sure was. It was well built.
The Santa Fe accident, do you remember what year that might have been?
Oh, it was in the middle 30s somewhere.
It was just a derailment and it derailed over the river?
Yeah, a passenger car went into the river, 2 cars. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, we could probably spend a few more hours.
Well, I wish I had more exciting things to tell you, but
well, you've told us so much.
That's about it.
I'm sure that we'll come away thinking
Yeah.
about more questions that we could have thought of that we didn't think of.
You asked me about schools, and I'd forgotten about it. Kemper Military School.
Oh,
I
I
was
see.
up there for a while in Boonville, Missouri. That was a nice part of my life. It was good to learn discipline. I didn't like it at the time, but it was good training. Yeah. I was the youngest, as you say, I was the youngest kid in the school then.
I see. So all these experiences have really, have really shaped your life.
That was the year that I started in the picture business. That's when I left Kemper and started in.
You mentioned Benny Kent, who was a very early filmmaker in Oklahoma. Did you know him personally?
Oh, yes, I knew Benny very well. He lived in Chandler, and we'd converse every once in a while. He would photograph for Pathé before I was in there. And he called me one day and he said, I have not kept a list of my films, dates, times, and places. They're all in boxes. And I said, Benny, why don't you bring it up here to the 29th floor of the Ramsey Tower, and we'll index it on our moviolas and put it in cans and where it'll be stored properly in boxes and indexed and everything. So he came down and we spent a whole week, and he sat there at the moviola with me and indexed all that film. And I think later on, Lou Wentz put that in a museum, I think at Ponca City, I'm not sure.
We'll have to investigate that. About how old of a man was he when?
Oh, Benny was, he was in his late 60s then, as I recall, just guessing ages. But he was still spry and could identify all the shots and the times and the places. And he had some dating clear back to Teddy Roosevelt, things like that. And had a wonderful assortment of film.
And one question that just popped in my mind. Now, the home that that your parents built that was near the Overholser Mansion in northwest Oklahoma City in the Heritage Hills, the basement area was a mini theater, and you had your sound equipment and all that. Roughly, your father helped buy all that equipment for you. How much do you figure that cost?
Oh, and in those days, the motiograph projectors for a theater, which is what they were, I think it was something like $4,000. That was the sound and the screen and the arc lights, the whole set of motiograph dual projectors, because you'd run from one reel and then jump to the next, you see, and that's what it would run. Plus the sound recording equipment and cameras and lights, that was far more.
Quite terribly expensive today.
Oh yes, today it's out of sight. The cameras that we paid, $1,900, $2,000, are now $50,000. Same Mitchell cameras in the studio.
What was the first film project that you did? Do you remember?
First one. My uncle, W.E. Ramsey, bought me that DeVry camera when I was in Kemper Military School, and I made some films up there, 100-foot rolls. Yeah.
And what was the first major film project?
Oh, sound and really for newsreel. Going to Yellowstone Park and photographing Calvin Coolidge in front of the geyser. That was it.
What was the reason for filming him there? Was there any special legislation that he was enacting, or?
Not that I knew of. Of course, I didn't pay any attention to politics at that age, and it was just a newsreel shot. And of course, I would gladly go to Yellowstone Park for the trip alone. So I went, made the pictures.
I was going to ask you, when we were talking about some of the personalities that you filmed while in Oklahoma, did you film any prominent Native Americans or have anything to do with the Indian tribes in Oklahoma at all? Or were you ever asked to by...
No, I don't think so. I was trying to think back. I don't remember that we had any in those days. Now here you have your Navajo, but you see you had your Cherokee, and you had the Delaware and Caddo, but there was no chief as such that was a flamboyant fellow that caused trouble, or didn't it? Or
It was
did
pretty
it?
well
Yeah.
quieted.
They had sort of all joined with the average American and become a part of the scene, you know. And they were just like anybody else in Oklahoma, as you know. All except the Osage is the only crowd that are still controlling their little areas. So I don't remember of any or photographing any.
Well,
Gordon, Lilly, and up at Pawnee, Pawnee, Oklahoma. And then, of course, he had it all Indian. You know, he put on quite a show for the Indians, and Indians put on a show for him. So that was as close as we got to it, I guess.
I see. Well, that was just something I'd forgotten to ask, and I'm glad I remembered.
Well, there's lots of other things we photographed that I just can't remember all of it. Ken Corder has a list of all the things I photographed. You could get that from him.
Well,
Plus
we
the last
will.
of the films that I sent to him here not long ago.
Well, we're going to work closely with him. He has some excellent film that I know that the Historical Society would be very interested in, because that was a medium of the 20th century of motion picture and, of course, television. And unfortunately, for Oklahoma, it's just now realizing the importance of those early films.
No, it's just a shame I didn't get to turn all that film over to the Cowboy Hall of Fame when I left Oklahoma in 61 or 62, because at that time I had about 160 to 170,000 feet, but they wanted cowboy film only, and that didn't fit, because that was all intact then, and it would have given you a lot more film to work with. I hope you can find that film that was stored in Judge Hefner's house on 14th and Robinson, the Heritage, whatever.
We're going to investigate that, because they may not even be aware that it's there.
May not.
And I can't imagine them owning a home all these years. The Oklahoma Heritage Association maintains the Hefner home, and I will find out to what extent, if they found it, what they did with it, and if anything. So, Mr. Ramsey, we deeply appreciate your time. And,
well, it's been a pleasure.
And speaking with Judith Michener, Assistant Oral Historian, and myself today, and thank you very much.
We're going to tie it up. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It has been a pleasure. I sure
You're
do.
very kind. Thank you for coming a long way.